in time just holding out very well for the bulls. It's about a 0.4% gain as far as the Sensex and the mid-caps are concerned. Sensex and Nifty are concerned, and a good, say, 0.6% higher on mid-caps. So it's almost two stocks in the green for one in the red, and that's a fine way to go to the budget. Hopefully, there'll be nothing to rock the boat. But what can rock the boat? It can only be taxes. Will they be raised? Unlikely in a pre-election budget. Will they be cut at a time when the government wants giveaways? Those are the big questions we want to ask the two tax experts who join us now. Dinesh Kanabar, CEO of Dhruv Advisors, and Sudhir Kapadia, National Tax Leader at EY. They are our tax gurus for this morning, our tax editors. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining. Mr. Kanabar, many congratulations. There's a wedding in the family, and it's so kind of you to worship work before you worship the gods for the marriage.
or worship the finances before you worship anything else.
Okay. That's more realistically put. But really, do you expect them to tinker with taxes for the next 6 weeks? I mean, April 1st to maybe May 15th. And after that, you could have another finance minister, maybe from the same party. So, do you think they'll tinker with taxes?
So, if you go back in history, whenever there has been a vote on account with elections just around the corner, the government has very rarely made any changes to tax laws. So, finance bill, which is part of the finance minister's speech, really becomes very insignificant in a situation like that. That said, there are a few things which could happen, which is tinkering with the rates of taxes or increasing the threshold limit, etc. I think what the finance minister could well do, and which I think which is more important, you spoke about rocking the market, but one of the things which is, for example, engaging the market is angel taxation. And angel taxation has become something which media has spoken a lot about.
Yes.
But really the issue is where an investment is made, and investment is treated as income of the recipient in a variety of situations, even excluding angel tax. That's been something which has been haunting the entire private equity market, the entire FII community. And the finance minister could well do a few things right out there, which could really take care of those situations. If you look back in law, there is nothing in law which really stops a finance minister from making a number of changes to the Finance Act or Income Tax Act. It has rarely happened in the past. But given some of the situations which need to be addressed, we saw the circular being issued, the circular being withdrawn in a couple of days on angel taxes. Those are some of the issues which you could well address. That's right, on the taxes front.
And as the clock strikes 10 and we move from markets to taxes, we also have a change of guard at the anchor's seat. Surabhi Upadhyay with us. She's also our in-house tax editor.
Thank you so much for that, Lata. Well, we learned from the men who are right here with us in the studios over the years. But as you were pointing out, Mr. Kanabar, let me also get Sudhir into the conversation over here. The point being that there is not much with respect to indirect taxes anymore in the budget. It's all about direct taxation. On direct taxes, given that the DTC is still work in progress, is there something you would expect by way of intent, maybe at least a statement, at least a promise, that the 25% corporate tax threshold, that promise is at least intact? Sudhir?
So, I think I would say there are 2 points here. One is, of course, nothing prevents the finance minister, and this is a very good opportunity actually for him, to say that we have introduced the GST reforms and the direct tax reforms are on the way. It is very much, at any time that the report will come out of the expert committee. So you're right, certainly nothing prevents him. And I think he'll probably find this a good opportunity to do it. I think related to this, the point Dinesh was making, I would only submit that anyway, the circular power is already there. You don't need the budget speech to say it. But given that some of these issues, angel tax, Dinesh spoke about, even the prosecution notices, for example, we spoke about them a few days ago. This is the opportunity to address those concerns. And he can simply say they will be addressed, or even bring necessary amendments in the law, which in my view will be clarificatory, can well be done. And in the past, clarificatory amendments have been done, even in the vote on account. It need not be a substantial amendment to the law, but clarificatory nobody is preventing by constitutional norms or otherwise.
So there you raised a really important point, and Lata, I want to get Mr. Kanabar's view on this as well. Whether what we saw a couple of weeks back, whether that was really a big case of the taxman getting over-aggressive just because revenues are looking a little. little disappointing this year? Or was it sort of, was there more smoke than real fire in that entire episode?
So you look at both the aspects, whether it is angel taxation or it is prosecution. The issues are real. Now, how much of the community is getting impacted is a point of view. Really, I'm aware of at least a dozen odd companies which have received investments and which investments have been treated as income on account of valuation differences, whatever. Similarly, if you look at prosecution notices, lots of them. So there is one issue which has come up, for example, and I don't think too much has been focused on it. The prosecutions which have been launched this year are roughly about 11 times what was launched last year. Okay. Now, I'm not saying people have been prosecuted. The two are different things altogether. Notice is sent to people that please show cause why you should not be prosecuted. Now, that really shows an overzealousness. And I think I totally agree with Sudhir that the finance... And one thing which we have seen consistently, Lata and Surbi, which really worries me is that when you speak on the floor of the parliament, you give a nice intent. How does that intent get translated when it goes on the field, and the disparity which you have out there? So, for example, when the tax office is today issuing prosecution notices, they're absolutely within the legal powers.
Okay.
The question is, how are you actually implementing those things?
Okay. Well, we have out of time, and we'll have only one question each for both of you on what is legitimately possible in terms of tax giveaways at a time when everyone is expecting them to spend more. Mr. Kapadia, very quickly, what are possible giveaways?
Very quickly, you saw the GST news that should give some cheer. I've said this before. I personally think, this exemption limit being increased is not a good tax policy. I don't think they will resort to it. One small statistic: the number of taxpayers 5 years ago was 5 crores. It is 7 crores today. The moment you increase the limit, you take them out of the tax net completely. I think tinkering with deductions is what we will see, not necessarily an increase in the threshold limit.
Okay. What in deductions? I mean, I think Surabhi was even pointing out some giveaways for insurance. Will it be ATCC?
If you take the deduction limit, it's 1,50,000. It includes so many basket of, we discussed the other day, if you want to encourage housing. So interest, interest costs have gone up. Even if you take a 1% increase in borrowing cost for housing, absolutely, and for self-occupied. So you're not, encouraging speculative investments. I think there is room for that, that kind of a policy measure.
Well,
that is my take on it.
It would always be very welcome. I mean, the last time the ATC limit was hiked actually was in the first year of this government.
Absolutely.
2014 is when they moved the needle from 1 lakh to 1.5 lakhs.
Absolutely.
So now whether they'll want to sort of end with a bang as well and take it higher up.
That is more likely, in my view, than the exemption limit for taxation.
Because they want more records.
Sense,
Your sense, first-time home buyers or insurance or...
Actually, the one thing which he can do, and I don't know whether he will or he will not, is to address the MSME sector. The question is, we have certain deductions which are based on employment. We saw the employment data come out, and that was not really very, very encouraging. And given that, the question will be, can you do something more by way of a tax incentive purely for employment generation? And I do hope he will address it, because that is the need of the hour.
Okay. Well,
no, just on some of the other sort of touchy areas have been long-standing issues with the industry. For instance, why not move to the alternate minimum tax regime instead of just going through MAT? I mean, is there any expectation, even by way of intent statement, that you would expect this time around, Dinesh?
So we are, as Sudhir mentioned earlier, awaiting the report of the DTC committee. And the DTC committee is expected to be ready in the next few weeks, really, and that will be for the new government, whoever comes in, to really examine the DTC provisions and how do we make those changes. From whatever I have heard, the DTC is not looking at making drastic changes to the existing tax laws. They want continuity, which I personally welcome, because making too many changes really does not allow the law to settle down. It really unsettles the law, which takes years and decades to settle down. So I really don't expect, and MAT and AMT, really, MAT is there for companies, AMT is already there for other than corporate. So I really don't see any significant changes there.
On some of the sunset clauses, for instance, a lot of deductions anyway are going away. That's the only way we'll move to 25% corporate tax rate. But for instance, the R&D deductions that are available, would you expect any sort of, any increase in the current timelines or any deductions to be actually carried forward?
My view on this is that I don't think you will see the clock turning back. I think 3 deductions. We know the SEZ one. There is a sunset March 2020. Of course, your grandfather, that is good, previous this. R&D, you have actually seen a reduction to 50%. And mind you, one thing which has been not noticed, accelerated depreciation from 100 to 40%. So what you are seeing is a clear roadmap to whittle down incentives, which is what will give the leeway for the reduction in corporate tax rate across the board. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So I don't see that clock being turned back is my personal view. You know.
Lata, the experts haven't spoken about the four-letter word, LTCG, which was a high point.
But before that, if I could...
The stock market spoke about it a goodish bit. One thing that
our
they could
here,
is LTs. But can they bring it in 1 year and take it off in another year?
Like when previous FMs have been known with that moniker, you know, what is a rollback finance ministers? I don't think this government would like to go away with that 1 year rollback.
You want to experiment and see if it's a tax that works. Do you really seriously?
I something different. You know, we spoke about reduction of rate of tax and 25% and all of that. And if you look at what happened at Davos, really the clamor in the USA to say that actually the people at the highest level, why should they not pay a 70% rate of tax? And I'm sure those voices will also come around. So USA is talking about, that of course depends on who comes in, talking about introduction of a wealth tax of 1 to 2%. So that's one aspect they are talking about. They are talking about getting the highest strata to pay much larger tax. And here we are talking about reduction. Of course, we have different needs. USA has different needs altogether. But really the world doesn't seem to be really clamoring now. So again, we are talking about estate duty. And, you know, had this not been a vote on account and had this been a full-fledged budget, I'm sure we would have been talking about LTCG, we would have been talking about estate duty, we would have been talking about a number of
wealth tax.
Absolutely.
No, I agree with you. I think world over, that is the cry that we have to pay.
And therefore, to add to what Dinesh has said and to link it up to the tax base erosion point, I mean, I don't see the reason to roll back an LTCG.
Right? What about tax?
No,
what is the reason for that?
Another guest waiting. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kapadia and Kanabar, and we will of course touch base with you despite your personal engagements.
Thank you.
After the budget is announced. And now